Aircraft accidents occur every year, with search and rescue teams frequently deployed. Their horrifying discoveries in the wreckage or flight systems are often shocking enough to make global headlines. The mystery of the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 remains unsolved. The sudden loss of communication and unexpected deviation from its flight path have baffled experts to this day. Above the Bermuda Triangle, a strange magnetic field engulfs all who venture into it, leaving us to wonder where the vanished have gone. Suspicious marks of attack on airplane fragments raise questions. Is this the result of a conspiracy or merely an accident? 8 airplanes, 8 accidents, 8 mysterious stories begin to unfold. In UMBR-8 MH370, the disappearance of MH370 is probably the most chilling aviation incident of the past decade. The sudden vanishing of over 200 passengers and crew members, the scattered debris, and the elusive black box have turned the bizarre disappearance of MH370 into an unsolved mystery. After receiving the news of the plane's disappearance, search and rescue teams not only rushed to the suspected crash site but also utilized electronic information systems to study the aircraft's flight path, leading to eerie discoveries. MH370 took off from Kuala Lumpur with Beijing as its destination. The route was fixed and the course was clear, virtually eliminating the possibility of a navigational error due to human fault. Moreover, according to the staff at Kuala Lumpur Airport, there were no issues with the plane during the pre-flight check. The fuel supply was more than adequate, and the pilot was experienced, indicating that the aircraft itself was properly equipped. However, according to ground control data, MH370 made contact with the command center half an hour after takeoff, and upon reaching the vicinity of the South China Sea, it suddenly deviated sharply from its course, heading toward the Indian Ocean, after which the signals to ground receivers abruptly vanished. This suggests that something unknown may have occurred on board, particularly in the cockpit, in the moments from normal flight to the deviation. In UMBR-7, in 2016, an aircraft flying from Paris, France, to Cairo, Egypt, lost control while over the eastern Mediterranean, plunging into the deep waters at 13,000 feet, which greatly complicated the search and recovery efforts. During the investigation into the cause of the crash, analysts found that the aircraft made 2 abnormal turns mid-flight. These turns were deemed abnormal because they were not included in the flight plan and were completely unnecessary. Initially, the plane inexplicably veered to the left at a sharp angle, which, according to ground radar, seemed almost like science fiction. Shortly thereafter, it turned dramatically to the right, completing a 360-degree turn almost instantly. Ground staff were unclear about what exactly happened at that time. However, once the smoke reports were released, it became apparent that the pilots weren't making navigation errors but were likely attempting to quickly maneuver the aircraft to expel excessive smoke from the cabin. A French investigative firm later claimed that the tragedy occurred because a pilot was smoking illegally in the cockpit. Despite these explanations, the public has been skeptical about the veracity of the investigation. In UMBR-6 Northwest Airlines Flight 2501, this tragic aviation accident occurred in 1950 in the United States. Despite being a long time ago, the event and its outcomes were shocking. At the time, the pilot noticed sudden changes in the weather conditions and deemed it unsafe to continue flying at a high altitude. Consequently, he contacted ground control to request a decrease in flight altitude from 3,500 feet to 2,500 feet. However, changes in an aircraft's flight altitude cannot be made arbitrarily due to the risk of encountering other aircraft at the lower altitude and potential regulatory restrictions. For these reasons, the pilot's request was denied by ground control. A few minutes later, the flight signal was lost, and all calls from ground control went unanswered. It was then realized that the weather conditions might have been more severe than initially thought, leading to the aircraft's demise over Lake Michigan. In the 1950s, aviation accidents had a very high fatality rate, making survival unlikely for the crew and passengers involved. Subsequent search and rescue operations located some of the aircraft's wreckage. Despite extensive searches and attempts to recover more from the depths of the lake, the main body of the aircraft and additional human remains were never found. The true cause of the accident and the final whereabouts of the plane remain unsolved mysteries to this day. In UMBR-5 Air France Flight 447. In 2009, this aircraft was en route from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, to Paris, France. It was carrying 216 passengers and more than 10 crew members. After takeoff, the flight proceeded smoothly until it reached the airspace over the Atlantic Ocean, where it inexplicably lost all communication. Ground control was baffled as they were certain that Flight 447 had not sent any distress signals during the flight, nor had it reported any issues immediately, leading them to believe that everything was normal with the aircraft. There were no distress calls, no radar warnings, nothing abnormal reported. Yet that aircraft simply vanished. All the relatives were left waiting for an explanation from the airline. It wasn't until 3 years later that the airline issued a non-committal response, suggesting that ice crystals had clogged the aircraft's pitted tubes, leading to malfunctions and the subsequent accident. However, since not all the wreckage was found, how this conclusion was reached remains a mystery. In UMBR 4, Helios Airways Flight 522. In 2005, this aircraft deviated from its flight path en route to Greece. Ground control quickly noticed the anomaly and repeatedly sent radar requests to the aircraft. But after more than 10 attempts, they received no response. Consequently, ground control was forced to dispatch the fighter jets to intercept Flight 522 and attempt to establish direct contact. Unexpectedly, the fighter pilots encountered a harrowing scene. In the cockpit of Flight 522, the captain's seat was empty, and the co-pilot slumped in his chair, his oxygen mask discarded, apparently unconscious. The situation in the cabin was equally disturbing. All passengers appeared rigid, sitting motionless in their seats, making it impossible for the fighter pilots to determine if they were still alive. The ordeal ended tragically when the aircraft crashed into a mountain, resulting in the death of everyone on board. The fighter pilots were powerless to alter the grim outcome. In UMBR-3, Washington Flight 800, in 1996, a Boeing 747 aircraft en route from New York to Rome experienced a catastrophic event. The sight of a Boeing should remind one to be vigilant as calamity might follow. While over the Atlantic Ocean, the aircraft suddenly exploded, disintegrating instantly and falling into the ocean like a giant fireball, sparking a shower of flaming debris. How could a well-functioning aircraft just explode? With this question, the FBI quickly mobilized, diligently retrieving debris from the Atlantic to search for evidence. There were initial rumors that Flight 800 had been the target of a terrorist attack, which led to the tragic destruction of the aircraft and loss of lives. However, after more than a year of investigation, the FBI concluded that there was no evidence to support the theory of a terrorist attack, and the cause of the crash remained unclear. Was the cause truly undetermined, or were there political conspiracies at play, making clarity impossible? In response to these speculations, insiders have suggested that the FBI may have concealed the truth about a naval missile strike. In UMBR-2, Aer Lingus Flight 712, in 1968, Flight 712 took off from Ireland, destined for London, UK. However, before reaching its destination, the aircraft crashed unexpectedly, and the extent of damage to the fuselage was so severe that it hindered the progress of the investigation. There were 61 people on board, and tragically, this intense air disaster spared no lives. Authorities immediately launched an investigation, scouring the wreckage and searching for the bodies of the victims. Working frantically, there were reports that investigators found traces on the aircraft debris that suggested the plane might have been attacked. This implies that before the crash, the aircraft could have been deliberately harmed or involved in an accident. What kind of accident requires the sacrifice of 61 lives? Soon, rumors pointed towards Britain. Public opinion suggested that the British government was testing missiles illegally, which led to the catastrophe. Whether this was negligence or an intentional act aimed at provoking an international dispute remains unclear. The British government faced widespread criticism but quickly responded, vehemently denying any involvement. Ultimately, the matter faded without resolution. In UMBR-1, Bermuda Triangle, the Bermuda Triangle, an area bounded by Bermuda, Miami, and Puerto Rico, is reputed to have the most anomalous magnetic fields and the strangest environmental conditions on Earth, earning it the nickname the Bermuda Triangle. It's also known as the pilot's graveyard due to its mysterious allure. In 1945, 5 torpedo bombers were carrying out a mission over the Bermuda Triangle. Each aircraft had over a dozen people on board. Initially, the flight was proceeding normally until they reached a location resembling an air vortex, where all 5 planes vanished without a trace. This disappearance terrified those on the ground, prompting them to dispatch a rescue team of 13. Astonishingly, despite their superior flying skills, these rescuers also mysteriously disappeared, seemingly cursed by the Bermuda Triangle. To this day, no trace of the planes, the people aboard them, or even their bodies has ever been found on Earth. While airplanes have become one of the most common modes of transportation, their accident rates are actually not very high. However, when accidents do occur, the mortality rate is exceedingly high. Moreover, the reasons behind these accidents are often complex and mysterious, with many aspects that science cannot easily explain.